how quickly can airlines, cruise lines, hotel stocks rebound? Let's bring in an expert panel to have a really great discussion here. And so Madhu Unnikrishnan is with us, editor of Skift Airline Weekly. Seth Kaplan, transportation analyst for NPR's Here and Now aviation journalist. So it's great to see you both. Madhu, I'll start with you. When you look at the group, I mean, obviously the big talk today is that the Boeing CEO said that a U.S. airline could actually go out of business. This morning, he actually said that on the Today Show. It certainly seemed presumptuous. It almost seemed like, does he know something we don't, or is he just sort of talking off the cuff because the times are so tough?
You know, I would never second guess the CEO of Boeing, and I think without getting, I don't think he knows specifically anything more than we do, but it is entirely likely that a big airline will go out of business this year. I mean, they're flying people at 20-30% what they did last year, if they're lucky, and international travel in particular is not expected to rebound for some time. So it's very likely that it's just not sustainable. It's very likely we'll see a bankruptcy.
Right. You know what's so funny is you talk about the recovery being prolonged for some of the other names, Madhu. I just wanted to grab your attention because I noticed you had Alaska on there and Spirit and JetBlue. What other people I've had on said that they thought Delta was the better play. It had a great balance sheet beforehand, international story, or Southwest was the better play because they do short, quick trips in the U.S. You seem to be favoring some of the other names as the winners in this group, Madhu. Why?
Well, I think Southwest, JetBlue, and Spirit are all, and Alaska are all sort of in the same bucket, in that their route networks are primarily domestic in the U.S. and shorter trips. And I think the conventional wisdom is emerging now, the consensus is emerging now that the shorter trips, the domestic travel will recover before international travel. So okay. I think adding Southwest to that list, I think that's what we'll see.
Seth, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at airlines, you can kind of slice and dice this a few different ways, right? First of all, what kind of position were they in going into the crisis? So Southwest, an airline that was about as well positioned as any around the world in terms of a good balance sheet. Delta, you mentioned too. So to that question, both airlines positioned well going into this crisis, but which would you rather be in terms of network exposure? Probably Southwest, if you believe, as many people, as Madhu mentioned, that domestic travel is likely to bounce back before international travel. Also, just from a revenue exposure standpoint, would you rather be depending on selling some, $8,000 fly flat all aisle access business class seats around the world or not? If you're Delta, that's some of what you typically depend on. As far, by the way, as what Boeing CEO said, Dave Calhoun, if you listen to the interview, I think he was agreeing with the general idea that the industry was in trouble. I did contact Boeing today to sort of press them on that. And they said that he had no specific names in mind when it came to that. But sometimes, Nicole, I think the question's more interesting than the answer, and what you don't say is more interesting than what you do say. And just the fact that you could be asking that months removed from record profits for some of these airlines, and the fact that Boeing CEO couldn't just say no, I think speaks to the situation we're in.
And Nicole,
and Seth, I'm glad
let me
you
just
followed
add
up and asked them that question, so that this way he had to clarify either he had something in mind or he didn't. And that's interesting. That in itself is somewhat breaking news right there. Madhu, I wanted to expand this out to the cruise lines and the hotels. The consumer is going to come back. I don't know. Where do you think the strength will be?
Among those three, airlines, cruises, and hotels?
Yeah.
I think we'll start to see domestic leisure travel in the U.S. come back faster than anything else. I think there's also there's just a public fear factor with cruises right now. The people are not going to be taking trips until they feel comfortable and safe doing so, and I think the cruise industry has a ways to go. Now, I'm no expert on the cruise industry, so I can't really speak to them, but this is just what I've been reading from our reporting at Skift. Like I said, and to build on something,
it's important to know how the consumer is thinking.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
Also, Seth, quickly, what are your thoughts as we expand it out, Seth, into the cruise lines and the hotels? Because some of these things go together, right? You book them online, you go onto one of these sites, and you book your airline and your hotel together. Seth?
Yeah, all kinds of exposure there for companies that do bundle those trips, right? If you think of the recovery, we talked about how domestic likely to happen before international. For the most basic reason of all, simply that we are allowed to travel domestically, right? We don't know when we'll be allowed to travel around the world. Cruises are impacted by that in many cases, serving ports in multiple countries, but also reasonable to think that family visit travel is going to bounce back before pure leisure travel. Family visit travel first of all, people simply miss their families. I know, I was supposed to be in Florida last week visiting our family. A lot of people are in that situation. The first trip that they're going to take is going to be to see their families again. Also, from a personal finance perspective, a family visit trip is often just the cost of the airline ticket. You're not necessarily booking a hotel and having meals out and all the rest of it. And with people's personal finances squeezed right now, reasonable to think they'll opt for that. Cruises obviously are pure leisure travel.
Got it. Madhu Unnikrishnan, the editor of Skift Airline Weekly, and Seth Kaplan, transportation analyst for NPR's Here and Now aviation journalist. Thank you both.